All right, welcome along to the Huddle Breakdown, the new look Huddle Breakdown if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube and you're just listening, we sound the exact same. But if you check out, we've got some new fancy graphics going on the YouTube stream. So check out the YouTube at the call with Enda Call if you want to watch the podcast instead. We're looking back at the Scottish Cup this week, the 3-0 win against Falkirk, a fairly comprehensive win. And Celtic actually deserved to win a football match, which is pretty nice. Juco James and Al Morrison are with me as always. Lads, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, hi. And I'll apologise now because I'm going to get distracted with all these rolling things going around the screen. So I'm going to be like a dog trying to chase a ball, Not used to all this tech.
with this fancy new tech, and I mean, I got a haircut, and look at this balding spot. This is a nightmare. So can you use some of this fancy young guy tech stuff to maybe draw some hair in?
I don't think we have deep fix just yet. We're moving up in the world, but I have the opposite problem of you right now, and I know this is the biggest young person problem of all time. But I can't get a haircut, so my hair is getting too long. I've too little bald spots going on, and I just don't know what to do. The hairdressers aren't going to be open, or the barbers, whichever you use, aren't going to be open for like another month, maybe 2 months in Ireland. Oh. So yeah. Oh yeah, we've gone full on lockdown in terms of we are level 5 forever until we're not. It's no longer, they've abandoned the level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. It's just level 5 until we're not level 5 now. But I guess people aren't here to listen about COVID. People are here to listen about Celtic and their 3-0 win against Falkirk. I don't think anybody expected a performance as dominant as this. I do think we expected Celtic to dominate the game, but really and truly, this was probably the best Celtic performance. I know you're talking about levels of opposition, but in terms of dominance, we haven't seen Celtic dominate a game like this all season, really.
No. Alan, go ahead. Again, with Falkirk as the enemy, you should go first here.
So yeah, context is everything. So in terms of what sort of opposition were Falkirk? Well, first of all, the biggest surprise, I think the big surprise that Falkirk were dominant. The biggest surprise to me was that the team that Falkirk actually chose. So they made 8 changes from their, for context, they're battling at the top of SPFL League One. They're trying to get back into the Championship, which is probably where they should be as a minimum for a club that size. And they made 8 changes, and they brought in some lads, literally teenagers, really, who are not even their players. I mean, Falkirk have had a great youth system for years, which they disbanded, which was a very controversial decision. And the kids that they brought in, some of them are not even Falkirk players. They're on loan from, and they even had a kid from the Rangers, a lad called McClelland, who played pretty well, and a lad Devaney as well, who's on loan. So they dropped players like Alston and Gomez, who are experienced Premier League players actually, in preference to these kids. They had Fotheringham in the midfield, who's a 18, 19-year-old from Dundee United. So that was a really brave call from them. I say brave. They were really looking ahead to the midweek game that they had last night against Airdrie, which they lost. So it didn't do them any good at all. So I think it was a bit strange. Plans. Yeah, I know. Well, why didn't they just pick the best team and have a bit more of a go at it, really? So to give you the context, I mean, this was as dominant as a game as I've ever captured in the sort of 6 years that I've been collecting data at the very granular level. You're really looking at an opposition equivalent to, I think, Albion Rovers or Linfield would be the two that spring to mind in recent years as being just. But I mean, Falkirk didn't even do a very aggressive defensive formation. They actually played with 2 people up front for most of the game, and then Salmon sort of dropped, kind of left later on. So this was just utter dominance, really. Having said all that, Celtic probably got pretty much what they deserved, a 3-0 victory. We had to be patient. No goals in the first half. Expected goals was 5, but if you look at shots on target, of which there were 9, that equates to around about 3 expected goals. If you look at post XG shots on target, the keeper made 3 saves and let 3 in, so that he actually had about an average game with 6 saves. I logged 39 shots overall. I think the BBC had 42, Y-Scout had 41, which I'll say no more than that. That is a warning, really, if you're going to purchase data. 78% possession, 57 touches in the box compared to they had none. as well as in 0 shots, they had actually no no touches in the box. I don't know what more there is to say. The other slightly interesting stat that I have to throw at you is the fact that they only committed 3 fouls as well. I mean, some of that probably is the John Beaton factor, maybe, but some of it is also the fact that this really wasn't a priority for them. They did their best. As I say, I think the lad at the back, McClelland, who's actually an Ibrox starlet, actually had a pretty good game, and he was really up for it. And he was giving it the Chris Ayers every time he cleared the ball. And fair play to the lad, he had a pretty good game. But otherwise, I don't think there was much else apart from Much's 6 saves to note from the opposition, certainly.
Yeah, James, a lot of shots for Celtic, a lot. And I saw a thing going around on Twitter earlier today of Ryan Christie's shot map from this game, and it was as we say on this show, it was just a typical Ryan Christie performance. Really, he got 1 goal, but he how many shots did he hit outside of the box alone?
I think it was 5 out of 6. Two of them were just slightly outside the box.
I had 3 out of 5. I had 3 out of 5.
Was it 3 out of 5?
Yeah, because 2 of them were on the line, and
right,
the line is in the box, right? So.
Yeah. As far as Christie egregiousness goes, it wasn't one that was particularly bad for me, particularly given the opposition and kind of his prorated percentage of shots. When he's taking 9 shots out of our 20, that's a little bit different than 6 out of 40 or whatever 39. I think I had reviewed a couple of his shots. I think probably the things that were you could be most critical about is Turnbull was basically wide open central on 2 of them. And, he just loves to come in on that left foot, and he's got his head down. So he doesn't have he never seems to have his head up when he gets into that shoot mode. So he kind of loses any kind of spatial awareness of teammates that could be in threatening areas. But yeah, it was, I personally, I don't find those kind of games enjoyable. It's just, I always joke with this kind of thing. It's kind of like Billy Madison playing dodgeball in the first grade or whatever it was. I mean, it's almost not really a competitive game. I mean, it's almost like an exhibition, like the Harlem Globetrotters or something. It's just such a disparity in quality. So. I didn't have the level of awareness as Alan did as far as the changes that they made. I mean, during the broadcast, they started highlighting the relative youth of some of the kids that they had playing. So again, given, they're playing 17-year-olds and that kind of thing. I mean, credit to them. I mean, it's just an amazing thing for them to be taking that on at that point. Whether or not there was fitness issues, there was talk of a Jetty having a knock, but our finishing just wasn't great again, which has been kind of symptomatic the whole season. Griffiths having some difficulty with some good chances. Would have liked to have seen Brown finish that one late. That would have been cool, but yeah, I mean, it's just one of those games where it's kind of like shooting fish in a barrel.
Well, that was the one. That Brown chance was the only one I logged as what they call a big chance, right? He was through with the keeper to beat. Keeper made a good save, but all the shots that Celtic had, none of them were really what you'd call great chances. In fact, interestingly, I think one of the highlights for me was the fact that you saw Forrest returning to some semblance of form. Forrest actually had 10 shots at goal. 7 were inside the box. He actually had possession of the ball 15 times inside the box, which is incredible. But he only had 1 shot on target, which was his goal. He had 4 off target, 3 were blocked. So 8 shots. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong call. 8 shots he had in total. So yeah, that was a pretty good to see him back. And the other person who kind of hasn't been playing a lot, who posted great numbers, was actually Rogic. So Rogic was my kind of boy of the match. I mean, he had it was actually him, Forrest, and Turnbull all had expected scoring contributions of just over 1.7, which is pretty impressive, especially as Rogic and Forrest didn't actually play the full game. Rogic created 8 chances and plus 1 assist, so 9 chances overall. So that for me that was pretty impressive. So yeah, those two, and I know they like playing together and they're good friends. But those two are probably the bright spots, I would say.
I've thought of two tangents that we could go on in terms of some of the things you just touched on. One of them is, the fact that Celtic could have played the boys in that game as well, except they've loaned the majority off them out. So that's a broader talking point. But I think James Forrest is someone that we haven't spoken about for good reason because he hasn't really been playing. But I've wondered a couple of times this year what difference James Forrest would have made, because I know a lot of people don't really like James Forrest for pretty obvious reasons in terms of his game, but does his data from previous years suggest that he would have made a big difference had he been fit this year?
Yeah, I mean, he's posted great numbers the last. He's had a real golden period of his career, I suppose, where he's seemed to get over his leg muscle injuries and put in, dedicated shifts in the team. And a front three of him and Sinclair and Dembele and then Edouard have been pretty effective over the last 2 to 3 years, and he's shown a remarkable degree of consistency in terms of goals and assists and actual output, and where he changed his game slightly, and especially under Rodgers, was obviously the two wide attacking players in a front sort of nominal front three. They were encouraged to actually play quite narrow at times and get into the box a lot. And he didn't score for Scotland for his first, 20 caps maybe, and then suddenly hit a peak of a rush of goals, and again in the last 2 to 3 years, and again by cutting in and playing more centrally. So I think yes, definitely Celtic have missed that because actually there's been no equivalent player on the right hand side. So that's been a real. I mean, the problem that Celtic have got width wise have been chronic this season. And we've talked about the fullbacks many times, and they've been no mitigation to missing that wide threat that the likes of Forrest, provides. He's always going to get criticism because he's a wide player, and by definition, wide players don't get on the ball as much, and therefore are seen to be less consistent. Forrest is probably as consistent a wide player, I think, as you're likely to get. He's pretty steady in his game most of the time. He doesn't always make great decisions. So yeah, he's definitely been a miss. Players, well, when you're having a bad season like this, as a team, players like Forrest tend to become even more inflated in people's minds as to how valuable they were. That always happens. I would still say, if you wanted to answer that question, for me, Julian and Forster are the two huge misses this season over any other players really. But there's so many problems that we could talk about. We have done. So, but it's certainly having Forrest back at this stage of the season has got to be a plus.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm definitely not sitting here saying that if James Forrest was fit for the season, that he's that sort of transient player that's going to completely change how Celtic were playing. But I do think he would have made a difference because of the flaws that we've had. In terms of this game, then James, what else do you want to talk about? Where are you looking at this?
Well, I'll touch on Forrest quick. So I think that Forrest's injury to me represents a few things. The first one is the lack of any recruitment of a winger. And I think that his injury exposed the lack of depth in that regard and highlights that the strategy coming into the season was likely 3-5-2, and that as we've talked about over and over again, the relative incoherence maybe of the recruitment within that context. But I think he's kind of the pivot guy in that, meaning that with him coming down with that long-term injury, I guess it was late August, wasn't it, or early September, and that really eliminated the flexibility to do anything other than what they ended up doing, which was kind of stick 3-5-2 and then pivot to the 4-4-2 diamond because of the lack of viable options on with wingers, particularly with Mikey Johnson being hurt the way he's been. So I think he would have made a huge difference because not 20 points difference. I mean, for any individual player, outside of a huge world-class keeper that might, maybe 7 or 8 points, that kind of difference in a season, you're probably talking maybe 2-3 points, maybe 4, for a massive upgrade in one position over what a player would, kind of a replacement level player, as they would put it in analytics. So, it's certainly not enough to make a meaningful dent in the title race, but I think as far as the ability to be flexible in how to play intra-game, not that Lennon would have done it, but having that tactical flexibility to make real changes that aren't like for like, and that's kind of been the plague of the season, I think, and we've talked about it over and over again with subs, is that they tend to be like for like and don't really change all that much. It's kind of just hope someone else comes in and does something brilliantly individually. So I think having a Forrest in the mix, could have really changed how much flexibility that we had as far as tweaking tactics in intra-game. The other thing I think about with Forrest is, and I put a thread out on this last week, is, he's already going to be entering his age 30 season, which is getting old for a winger. And so I hope that he's able to kind of evolve his game, and that there's some kind of a positional existence for him that isn't just a pure winger as we move forward in the next year or two. Because he's, I showed it in my thread. He's already started to show signs of decline in Europe against better opposition as far as output over the last couple of seasons. So that's probably not going to get better. To Alan's point, the last few years he's been elite in his fitness levels and his output. And, if he's at an elite level and he's starting to show kind of signs of early stage decline against higher level opponents, then that's probably not going to get better over the next couple of years. So, I love Forrest. He's been one of my favorite players, just as kind of a fan and a supporter. So whether that's, kind of an inside inverted forward, or, some of these formations like 3-4-2-1, like the national team, the Scotland national team, starting to play a lot with Christie and McGinn, kind of dual 10s. I could see him playing that kind of role. So he's just a terrific footballer. I hope that he can evolve. I'm just not sure it's going to be, he's going to stay out there on the wing and put up 15 goals and 20 assists.
No,
like he put up the last few years.
No, I'd have my doubts about whether he can evolve as well, just because of the type of player that he is, and age comes after these players as quick as any player on the pitch, because what Forrest relies on a lot of the time is getting the ball past the defender, beating the defender with pace, and then getting across into the box. And when you lose your pace, when you start getting injuries at this age, it just doesn't work out for you, unfortunately. Alan, I think you wanted to come in on something James was saying there, did you?
Well, I was just one other thing I'd just add to that on Forrest is that, I still think that he's been used in Scotland a couple of times as a striker, actually, as like a second striker, and I think there's some merit in that, because James Forrest running at you centrally, even a slightly age regressed Forrest would still be a pretty powerful weapon to have. I don't think he's got this sort of hold-up physical game to play a sort of traditional striker role, but as a second striker, I think that almost a sort of Ronaldo-esque, from an out-and-out winger to a more of a central presence could be something that could be considered. But the problem is that, Celtic have got so many 10s that occupy that kind of space, and second striker type. Even our strikers are really second strikers. Edouard and Griffiths are actually very similarly profile in that regard as well. So there's only really a Yeti that would be an out-and-out sort of number 9. But that would be something I'd think about. The slightly tangential thing that occurred to me watching the Falkirk game was more of it's starting to occur to me that, when we had the debates pre Lennon leaving, what is the input from the coaches? How much of the way Celtic play is Lennon asserting his style? What do the others feel about that? I think we're more and more seeing that actually Kennedy and Lennon were pretty close in how they wanted the team to play. I think there's definitely changes, but if I think about how, putting Forrest on the left, the fact that Brown played 90 minutes against Falkirk, in what way is that progressive for the club? It's just incredible decision. The way that I think there's slight tweaks, right? I think the fullbacks are a little bit more conservative. I think Brown's a little bit more central, and he doesn't wander as much. I think the play is a little bit more patient, but I think these are quite subtle changes that Kennedy has implemented. But I think there's some fundamental pieces there around lack of trust in the other strikers, even the preference of Griffiths over Klimala and Ajeti at times. The continuing use of Brown, the lack of trust in Soro. These are all things that we complained about and have persisted under Kennedy. So I think there's been some improvements, but there's been some things that I just don't think have really changed.
You could look at that two ways. You could look at it in the pro-Lennon side in the sense that, John Kennedy's come in here and Ajeti and Klimala and Soro still doesn't fancy it, so maybe there's something that they're not doing in training on the training ground they're not seeing, or you can look at it in the same way as you are, and it's a equally fair way of looking at it that John Kennedy was part of this camp as well, and that maybe a lot of the things that Neil Lennon believed in, John Kennedy didn't. The reason it wasn't changing was because John Kennedy was keeping it the same way, and it's carrying on into this season. Before we finish up then on the Falkirk win then, can I get your boy of the match and your what was the duffer of the match? That's the term that we've gone for the second one.
We're going to stick with that, yeah.
Do we want to go negative? We always go negative or positive first. I always leave it as a coin toss. So do you want to go negative or do you want to go positive? It's a 3-0 win. So I think we should go positive.
Yeah, I'm going to go positive first. Yeah, I'll go. I'm going to go with Forrest. Totally selfish reason. It's just enjoyable to see him back for me, given the relative lack, although now with the game coming up on the 17th, that'll change a little bit. But with most of these games not having all that much about them, it's just from a pure pleasure perspective to see him come in and score and actually have a pretty significant role in the game. It was the one part of the game I really enjoyed. So,
Alan, your boy of the match?
Yeah, I said earlier, actually, it was Rogic. I mean, to be honest, it was a bit of a coin toss between the two. So Forrest would have been probably my second choice. But yeah, Rogic, as I say, 9 chances he created. One of those was an assist. So he had his expected assists for the game was 1.3, which was significantly higher than anyone else. He also had 2 secondary assists to add to that, as well as he had 4 shots as well. So he racked up a fair 1.77 sort of expected scoring contribution. So that was pretty cool. He had the highest impact score of the game as well. 25 sort of pack events, either passing or receiving, mostly passing. So yeah, for those reasons, I think he was he posted the best creative numbers, I guess, of the team.
It seems quite harsh to come away with a duffer of the game, because 3-0 win in a game that the opposition didn't have a single touch in the box, a single shot, or posted an XG at all in the game. So I think that comes with the caveat that even if it was a bad performance, it's, again, context is everything to these performances. The performance was not bad enough that it caused malfunction in the entire team.
Yeah, no, I'll go with Griffiths for my duffer. Part of that's because of Alan. You'll have the number. I think he was over 1 in XG. So he really should have scored.
No, I had him 0.66.
Okay, 0.6. Okay, well, not as bad as what I saw from Y-Scout. But I was going to say it's as much for me a season-long achievement award, because I haven't given him one yet. It's just, for them to pretty clearly counted on him so much heading into this season, and the state of him. Just watching him in that game and in recent games, it's just he's clearly not up to the task, and he's just not doing enough when he's on the pitch. It's always been an issue as far as his all-around game. It's just for him not to score in a game against Falkirk in this season, when he's had some, again, he had some decent chances. I think it's kind of a exclamation point on what's going wrong with him this year.
Yeah, it's just if you look at Leigh Griffiths, I mean, he doesn't look like a player who should be playing for Celtic. Like, you know what I'm saying. Like, you'll there's certain players that carry a little bit extra timber or whatever, but Leigh Griffiths has only once looked like a professional footballer who should be at the standard that Celtic require, and it's just you just can't carry these type of players where you're playing at the level of which Celtic are playing. I mean, Leigh Griffiths, could he go to a St. Johnson or even higher than that, you know, go to Hibs or someone and be a good player for them? He probably could, yeah. Maybe not at this stage of his career, but for Celtic who want to be playing in Europe, you just can't carry these type of players anymore. And he should be one of the first players to leave the stadium at the end of the season, in my opinion.
Well, so somebody posted a video of him on Twitter this week. I forget, it was probably maybe the 2015 Dyla season, where he went down the left wing and just whipped in this cross, and he actually had pace and not ran a fullback to get to the ball, and he put in this incredible ball for a goal. And it, you know, people always back to the cognitive biases. I mean, that 40 goal season anchored him with people, I think, a lot of people. But he just has not been a player at a level that's European level for literally years now. I mean, it's been several years where he just has not performed. And I was hesitant with him coming in the 3-5-2 last season. And, you know, I gave him plaudits when he performed so well, with the caveat that a lot of that had to do with Edouard's brilliance in that setup. And also the run of games was against, you know, lower level teams, kind of bottom six SPFL level, where, again, just not a competitive level where he had struggled against in the prior few years. So, you know, I've had the same kind of worries about Rogic over the last 2 or 3 years, where, again, you see this dip against higher level teams, whether it's in Europa League or early Champions League qualifiers, where they just don't do that much when they play. And it's those kind of players that are, you know, their total game isn't diverse. You know, they're kind of one or maybe two-dimensional type of players. And they seem, when that dimension starts to erode a little bit, man, there's just not much there. And I think that's kind of the fate that's befalled Griffiths. So yeah, I actually didn't know his contract situation until this week, where the reports were coming out that it was an option year. I thought he had a year left. So I'm thrilled that it's an option and it can be quickly declined, because to spend 20 grand a week on him at this as a 31-year-old heading into next season, I mean, I cannot even imagine that would be considered seriously, or let's hope not.
Yeah, and I think, like, you know, as you said, there is a player in Leigh Griffiths. He was once a very good striker with pace, with good quality, with set pieces. He has ability, but, you know, a lot of personal issues came into his life, and his career has sort of derailed a little bit. But as a club like Celtic, you just can't carry that, in my opinion. You can't carry these type of players. And if Klimala is in the same boat, why are we still bothering with him? Get him out of the club. Same with Ayeti. If you don't want him there, if he doesn't fit the philosophy, get him out of there and give the younger players a chance. I mean, why are we bothering bringing Griffiths into these games, bringing Klimala onto the bench? Instead of sending Luke O'Connell out on loan, bring him into the squad, play him against Falkirk. Same with the likes of Ewan Henderson. Play these young players, see if they're good enough for the club, and just give them a chance over the deadwood that you know are going to be gone by the end of the season anyway. So I find myself getting very frustrated by Celtic playing Griffiths because of those reasons. Alan, in terms of the duffer of the match, is there anybody other than Griffiths that stood out for you as a lower performer?
I'm supposed to disagree with James, aren't I? But I couldn't on this occasion, unfortunately. He was already earmarked for that role. I mean, Griffiths has the habit of, you know, you watch him and then you see the numbers afterwards and you think, crikey, I didn't realise he'd, you know, because he's actually very efficient in the sense that he, you know, when he gets the ball, he doesn't tend to do a lot more than try and score a goal. And that sounds very glib, but it's actually incredibly powerful. And I used to joke that he actually had more shots than completed passes, and it was kind of a joke, but it wasn't far off. I mean, honestly, you look at a game, you think, oh, he's only completed 9 passes, yeah, but he's had 7 shots at goal, So that was Leigh Griffiths, and his speed, although he did have a little bit of a turn of pace, was always usually in his brain and over 1 or 2 yards to get space to get that shot off with his left foot, which is very effective. But I was stunned that he started, because again, what you're saying, Enda, which is what are we going to learn about Leigh Griffiths playing him against a very young Falkirk team? Surely you want to give a jetty some confidence, or you want to give a young kid some, show what they can do. So whether this is almost like a last throw of the dice, I don't know, because he trudged off after 30 minutes looking exhausted and pretty deflated, actually, and he, like you say, he didn't look 100% again to me, and he hasn't done for some time. He did have the lowest expected scoring contribution of all of the front 5 players. Really, I mean, Christie was a bit ahead of him. Christie actually, although he didn't have a great game, he at least he contributes in a range of ways to Celtic that still makes him effective, even if he's not having the greatest game from a shooting perspective. But with Griffiths, he didn't create much. He's not on free kicks now, so his creativity is going down. He created 1 chance. So his expected assists was very low, 0.03 or something. And as I say, he had 1 shot on target. So yeah, it was just yes, he was playing against a deep defence, but he actually did, as James said, he actually got sight of goal central on 3 occasions, and his timing was out, and his sharpness just isn't there. And which makes me think even more, why did we play him? Because that sharpness that would be obvious in training. It would be obvious. Why did we play a non-sharp Leigh Griffiths over others? The others, like you say, must be appalling in training, frankly, if that's where we are.
If Christie was good enough to play striker against Ferencváros, I think he was good enough to play against Falkirk.
Well, there you go.
Why did you remind me of that? I thought I got past my PTSD. One thing that we do want to talk about, because obviously, as I said, it was a game against Falkirk. It was a bit of a one-sided affair, and one topic that has been taking up a few headlines, not Celtic related, but generally Celtic related, is David Turnbull's omission from the Scotland Euro squad. And just if you look at their midfield that they've included, obviously they've got some really good talents in there, but you've also got John Fleck, Ryan Fraser and Kenny McLean. Now, John Fleck playing for the bottom side of the Premier League, who didn't win a game pre-Christmas. Ryan Fraser, who hasn't been playing at all for Newcastle, coming off the bench for a couple of appearances. And then Kenny McLean, who's playing in the Championship obviously he's playing for the top side Norwich. But again, you're talking levels here. David Turnbull, is he being harshly treated here by the Scotland national team? Should he be in it in terms of his numbers? I know we've done a Turnbull special, but surely he's deserving to be there ahead of John Fleck.
Yeah, I've been on record as being very optimistic about Turnbull long term, but also that I think a lot of people are kind of out over their skis on him in the short term. Alan's commented, I think, quite a bit on his output from open play being good, but nothing special. And I certainly have seen the same thing. I think given what it appears Clark's strategy is going to be with Scotland heading into the Euros, to me, it's more a question of roles. And I'm not sure I would see a role for Turnbull where he would displace an attacking midfielder, meaning that I don't think he's shown enough from a number 8 perspective as far as pressing and defending, where he would make sense in the system that they're probably going to be deploying against the opposition that they're going to be facing in the group. So you're really talking about, okay, well, what could he come on as a sub maybe to maybe try and score a goal late or facilitate and create? And, is he going to display Stuart Armstrong in that role maybe, or John McGinn or Christie, now with Che Adams up top, that maybe bumps one of, from, they've been going 3-4-2-1 or 3-4-1-2. So they might go more towards the 2-1 there with dual 10s with McGinn and Christie. And then McTominay with one of the other guys, whether it's McGregor or, somebody like McLean. And that's the thing. I don't think those are real apples to apples comparisons. Fleck's more of a box to box 8 from what I can see. And again, I don't pretend to have seen him a ton, but just looking at his data, that's kind of what he looks like to me. He's a little bit more aggressive in defending than a Turnbull profile. And McLean's kind of a standard defensive midfielder. I mean, he's actually very efficient defensively, it looks like, in tackles and winning duels. And so to me, it would be more of a squad composition question. I don't think, and Fraser's, a wide guy for the most part. So again, I could see Fraser's being attractive relative to, having a different mix, kind of the big guy, little guy, if you're going to go that direction with Lyndon Dykes and him, maybe, if you're going to play 2 up top. So I just don't see, and actually Fleck looks pretty good on set pieces, his history and set pieces, taking corners and such with Sheffield. So, I'm just not sure I see a role for Turnbull where, could throw him on at the end. But again, that young guy from Chelsea, Gilmore, I mean, there's some other guys that you could say, if I'm going to take a flyer and throw a young guy in, what could he bring to the table that could be a game changer relative to what's already there? I mean, I just can't see bringing on Turnbull instead of Stuart Armstrong at this point. If I was Clark, I mean, given the player, the profile, playing pretty well at Southampton, probably putting up numbers equivalent to what Turnbull's been putting up from open play, only in the Premier League.
Yeah.
So I just don't, I can't kill Clark over it. I mean, I think, it's probably a green and white glasses type of situation going on to a degree. And that's pure. I mean, I'd love to see him make it. I'd love to get to see and watch him in the Euros selfishly as a Celtic supporter. But when I put my analyst hat on, it makes complete sense to me that he's not part of the squad.
Yeah, I think people are more egregious about it because, Ollie McBurney is in the squad as well, and how Ollie McBurney is going to the Euros, and someone like David Turnbull, who had a really good season, is probably why people have an issue. Alan, I was looking at the Scotland squad though, and obviously they're at the Euros for a reason, but this is a really, really talented squad that Scotland have going into this. They've got obviously a very knowledgeable manager in Clark, who has figured out how to get Kieran Tierney and Robertson into the same squad, and is also working with Scott McTominay, who's a breakout player at United over the last couple of years. And it just seems to knit quite nicely together. Are you positive going into the Euros?
Yeah, I would be. I think you're right. I think there's some key individuals that are actually looking pretty decent at international level. I think Tierney, McTominay, like you say, Robertson's obviously very experienced at that level, but Tierney actually is so dynamic, and now that he's got himself back fit, his performance in the last international was just stunning in terms of his attacking from centre half. So yeah, pretty optimistic. As always, I look at the weaknesses, and there are still many in the squad. Striker being an obvious one. I mean, Che Adams looked like a really interesting player. Very busy, very sort of player that I imagine Clark would really get the best out of, because of his all-round contribution, willing to do a lot of the dirty work off the ball and close down and press and harry and chase lost causes, which playing for Scotland you're going to have to do. I think Dykes has looked probably more like his QPR form rather than his early Scotland form from what I saw in the first 2 internationals, so that would be a concern. McBurney, as I say, I live in Sheffield. Sheffield United is, I guess, my English team. I've always gone to the lane over the years. McBurney is, I'm afraid, is an awful player, one of the worst I've ever seen in my life, frankly. And he has been. I mean, it's just one of those players where, at the championship level in England, excellent, very effective, but just that jump up a level is just way beyond his capabilities. International football, sadly, is the same. Yeah, I think I agree with James. Fleck isn't really a like for like. Fleck's more of a deep lying playmaker. He's quite little, but he's quite robust. He does get stuck in, but he won't run beyond the striker. He won't really get into those 10 positions that much. But he's a creative deep passer, I would say. He adds that little bit of something different, I suppose. But I wouldn't equate him to Turnbull. Fraser gives the squad balance on both sides because he can actually play as either a winger or even a wing back, actually, on both sides. And Clark seems to like him as a support striker, and he's been quite effective there. So he can cover a number of positions. So when you're thinking about a squad for a tournament, covering multiple positions is a good thing. I mean, would you pick Turnbull? So those of us with a Celtic persuasion that are making the case for Turnbull, the question I would ask is, would you pick him above McGregor and Armstrong? And I would say,
No.
As with James, I would say no, you wouldn't. And then actually, just I was looking at his open play expected assists for Turnbull. So Turnbull's open play expected assists for Celtic this season is 0.256, which is decent. But he's lower than Christie. He's well lower than Rogic. So he's not even of those creative midfielders, or even sort of hybrid 10-8 type players that we've got. Christie would actually be third out of those three in terms of creativity from open play. Now, there is a case, especially for a team like Scotland, that you have him just for his special team capabilities from set plays, and actually that would, to me, would be a strong argument if you were going to be a team that based a lot of your like Ireland teams in the past, as you'll well know, Enda, put a lot of stock by set play and really milking those. And when you've got a great deliverer like an Ian Hart or a Kevin Sheedy, to pluck a couple of names from my generation, that definitely can pay off in these tight group games, these tight games. So yeah, I think I would agree with everything James said. Really sorry to be boring, but also quietly optimistic. But as I say, big weaknesses in that squad. The centre half position worries the hell out of me. O'Donnell is, God bless him, he's a willing lad, but he's desperately lacking the pace to play that wing back role and the quality, frankly, on the ball as well. So really exposed on that right side defensively, and striker. I just worry that there's not enough there from a striking perspective. So they'd be the three main concerns for me.
Shane Duffy was Ireland's top goal scorer for a reason over the last couple of years.
Well, so the one I'll add is I'm a little worried about Marshall at that level. So, and I'll echo right wing back, which I think it'll be interesting. To me, it seems, again, who knows, but to me, it seems pretty clear that both with Clark's tendencies and then the relative strength of the opposition in the group, that they're going to basically set up to be hard to beat. Try to keep the games really close, and then kind of like they did to get qualified, kind of nick a goal or get it to penalties and win that way. And that's what I think will be interesting as far as the decision he makes relative to keeper, and then at that right wing back position, because O'Donnell definitely fits with the hard to beat mantra. Because his pace isn't great, but he is a big guy and he's physical and he definitely puts a shift in. I give him a lot of credit, and he's one of those guys. He runs like a madman for the entire time he's out there, puts 100%, leaves it all out on the field. But would he go with Fraser, or maybe Forrest is ready by then, or closer to 100% fit if they want to try and get a little bit more attacking presence out there? So I think that'll be an interesting call. That might be one of the pivot calls. You can kind of get a sense as far as what his risk appetite is and how much it's kind of batten down the hatches and catch somebody on the counter or maybe a set piece. Because that England team's loaded, not terribly well managed from what I've seen, but talent wise pretty loaded. So I suspect, even I think it's the Czech Republic, and who's the other team? The other team, Croatia's good team. Yeah. So, that's a tough group. So, being more pragmatic and hard to beat's probably the smart way to go. Which again comes back to, would a guy like Turnbull really I'm not sure where he fits in that.
I think there was. I don't know. I've not heard anything recently, but one of the coaches, I think it was the Polish coach, was lobbying to have an expanded squads from 22 to 25, which actually makes a lot of sense, because if they're going to have to fly people in, if there's any sort of COVID alerts or anything like that, then having that 25 might just be logistically a more sensible thing to do. So if you got up to 25, then maybe you bring along a Turnbull, because, like I say, I think his special team abilities, in terms of set piece play, is something you might want to consider.
Yeah. The hard to beat thing is an interesting one, because obviously that debate is raging in Ireland at the minute. Stephen Kenny's come in and he's trying to change the identity of the Irish team, but it's almost a question now: is it better when you work with the players 3 weeks, 4 weeks out of the year to have a hard to beat side that are easy to coach in a couple of days, than try coaching identity off a side and bring these players in? But Clark is certainly a man that you would trust to make a team hard to beat because of what he did in his coaching career before this. So I will be supporting Scotland at this Euros because of what the state of Irish football is like. So I want to see Scotland doing well. Hopefully they beat England as well, because I mean that's all that people really care about, really. Like Scotland, are they going to win the Euros? Probably not. But if they beat England, I mean it's worth getting to the Euros for that alone. So
that would be an atypical Scottish campaign in a finals, would be that they beat England and lose the other two games and don't qualify. That would be absolutely classic Scotland.
And an England team, like you said, that is absolutely stacked as well. So I'm rooting for Scotland anyway. Hopefully they do well, and Clark brings a bit of pride back to the Scottish jersey in this campaign. So Alan, I'll give you the best of luck going into the Euros. We're going to be back tomorrow previewing the Livingston game. So depending on when you're listening to this podcast, this is the review, and we're going to be previewing the Livingston podcast as well. So that should be available in the usual spots as well over the next coming days. Alan, James, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, we'll chat to you later.